go see if these guys are gonna cook us or not. Play. Just here to go meet up with some brokers and possibly shoot the next episode. What's up everybody, this is Wallo and welcome to the second episode of the Likwid FX sessions. We're actually out here at the broker offices, FX Trading, and this is basically going to be our venue for this episode. Now, basically what we're going to be discussing in this one is what is responsible for driving the value of a currency. Right? What is responsible for influencing an investor to purchase or to sell a specific currency? Right? Now, we do understand that currency is no longer backed by gold. Right? The currencies that we are currently exposed to at this point in time are fiat currencies. Fiat currencies basically means that these currencies are backed by consumer confidence or investor confidence, which basically means the value of a currency can fluctuate based on the confidence that investors have within that specific currency. If I make an example, the value of the dollar is influenced by the confidence that individuals have in the American economy and in America itself. Now, the fundamental question that we need to ask ourselves is, where does this confidence come from? Where is this confidence created? Right? Because initially, or not initially, but what this confidence actually does is it creates supply and demand for different currencies. Now, what could cause a specific currency to be in high demand or a specific currency to be in high supply? Now, the question we need to ask ourselves is, what could drive the confidence that an investor or market participant would have in a specific currency? And the answer to this question is fundamentals. Fundamentals basically are different economic indicators, political events, political individuals, or geographic events such as earthquakes and hurricanes that would have a positive or a negative influence on the value of a currency. Now, this influence is basically an influence on investors. So, we're going to take a look at a different number of economic indicators. Mainly the five. We have gross domestic product, we have inflation, we have interest rates, we have unemployment rate, and we also have earnings or wages. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at, or the first thing we're going to explain, is GDP. GDP stands for gross domestic product. And basically what GDP is the sum of income divided by the amount of people within a specific economy or country. And this basically is what gives us a GDP number. Now, most of the time when we're looking at GDP, we're going to look at it in terms of percentages. The reason why is because we need to understand gross domestic product growth from quarter to quarter in terms of percentages, right? So, if we have gross domestic product for a specific currency that is growing, that would then increase the demand for that particular currency. So if we have GDP go from an increase in the first quarter of the year from 1.5% to 2% in the second quarter, this represents a growing economy. A growing economy would then have a positive influence on the specific currency, as this would increase confidence from investors or from market participants to actually purchase the specific currency. The second economic indicator we're going to be taking a look at is inflation. Now, inflation basically means the gradual increase in the cost of goods and services over a specific period of time. This specific period of time can be on a month-to-month basis, it can be on a quarter-to-quarter basis, or it can be on a yearly basis. Now, what we need to understand is, does inflation have a positive influence on a currency or a negative influence on the currency? For example, let's look at the price of bread. Now, when I was a little kid and I was on school holidays, every time my dad used to leave, he would always leave $10 in the bread bin. And that $10 could get me 2 loaves of bread for my brother and I to eat basically throughout the day. Obviously, we wouldn't eat a loaf of bread in one day, right? But now, not even 20 Rand is able to purchase 2 loaves of bread to this day. So the inflation from then up to now is more than 100%, but that's over, let's say, a 10-year span. Most central banks have inflation targets that they would like to meet. Majority of them are between 2 and 4% on a yearly basis or a quarter-on-quarter basis. Now, what we need to understand is how does inflation influence the value of a specific currency, either in a positive manner or in a negative manner. If we're looking at inflation, we cannot look at inflation on its own. The reason why we can't do this is because inflation and interest rates work in tandem, right? So, central banks use interest rates to cool inflation and vice versa. So if inflation is rising, interest rates need to come up in order to bring the inflation rate back down. So because central banks have specific targets with regards to the inflation and with regards to the interest rates, this is going to give us a little bit of more insight as to whether the inflation rate announcement will have a positive or negative effect on a specific currency. For instance, if the Federal Reserve, let's use the South African Reserve Bank, our central bank, right? Let us say they have an inflation target of 2% at the end of 2018. Now, if our inflation target is met, the South African Reserve Bank is more likely to increase interest rates. With higher interest rates, this increases investor confidence within a specific currency. In this case, the currency being the Rand. So, the higher inflation goes, the higher the chances of interest rates being increased. The higher interest rates we have, the more confidence investors and market participants have in a specific currency, thus increasing the demand for that specific currency. In this case, that would be the Rand. Okay, so we've just explained what inflation is with a little bit of interest rates. But now we're actually going to go into interest rates. Okay, so what are interest rates? Basically, interest rates are the cost that central banks charge to borrow. Okay, usually the people borrowing in this case are your government and your retail banks. Okay, so central banks basically are charging individuals or corporations a specific percentage to borrow, right? And this is what central banks use to control or to assist the strength or weakness of an economy, right? If interest rates increase, this creates higher investor confidence as there is higher yield or higher return on investment for investing in a specific currency. If interest rates are decreased, this would then influence investors to pull their money out of a specific investment and look for other currencies with higher interest rates, as the return on investment is higher on specific currencies that have higher interest rates, right? So what we need to understand about these different fundamental indicators is that they all have a ripple effect on each other, but the ultimate or where that ripple would end would be with interest rates, because ultimately that's where majority of investor confidence is actually derived from interest rates, or how will we build up to the actual interest rate decision that will actually then drive the direction of a specific currency. So let me give you an example. Or we can use the example of the South African Reserve Bank once again. So let us say the 2% inflation target that the South African Reserve Bank had not been met for the end of 2018. That then means that it wouldn't make sense for them to increase the interest rates because they don't want to drive the prices down. Remember, prices in an economy that are constantly moving down means that not enough money is being generated in that economy. It's actually an economy that is slowing down, right? So we also cannot have prices that are fluctuating at exuberant rates, because that would mean everything would be too expensive, which also means that everything in that economy is overvalued. So we need to have a equilibrium, a balance between our inflation and our specific economy. So our inflation rate has not been met. This now means that the South African Reserve Bank cannot increase interest rates with regards to charging the cost of borrowing. Now, what effect does this have on an investor? If I'm somebody looking to trade the rand, I would now be less likely to buy the rand against any other currency pair, as the yield on my investment is not going to be as high as it would have been should the South African Reserve Bank have increased interest rates. And basically, this is how we can use interest rates to influence our decisions, or to find out where investor confidence lies with regards to different currencies. Okay, so we've taken a look at a number of different ones. We're now left with two. We're now going to be taking a look at the unemployment rate. Okay, the unemployment rate is extremely important, as this is the biggest factor with regards to GDP, right? Every central bank and government as well has a target with regards to the unemployment rate in an economy or within a country. The unemployment rate is basically the rate of unemployment within a specific economy. Now, how does this affect the strength or weakness of a specific currency? This is what we're going to look into. If there's high employment within a country, right, it means more people are generating income. If more people are generating income, that means there's higher demand within that economy. If the demand is higher, that means that prices of goods and services will gradually start to rise, because that's what demand does. As those prices gradually start to rise, the inflation is basically rising, right? Now, if inflation is on the rise, what is more likely to happen to our interest rates? People are more, or central banks rather, are more likely to increase interest rates as to slow down the rate of inflation and keep it within a specific target. So the unemployment rate in an economy is extremely key, as it is the biggest factor with regards to calculating GDP, and it's also almost the beginning of your domino effect with regards to the end destination being interest rates. So understanding the employment rates in the country will help you understand the gross domestic product, will help you understand the rates of inflation, will also help you understand if interest rates are going to increase or decrease within the near future or at a later stage. Now we're going to look at our last economic indicator for the session, which is wages or average earnings, or in South Africa we get paid salaries. So it's called different things in different countries, but it basically refers to your payment. What is the rate at which people are getting paid? What is the rate of increases people are getting, or salary cuts or wage cuts, right? The reason why this is important is because this is one of the biggest drivers with regards to inflation and with regards to GDP as well. We can have an economy where more people are employed, but if we take a look at the wages or the salaries, people aren't being paid as much. If people aren't being paid as much, they have less money to spend. If they've got less money to spend, this drives the demand within a specific economy down. If the demand is down, prices of goods and services will then fall. If prices of goods and services are falling, this means inflation is on the decline, which ultimately leads to a less likelihood of interest rates being increased. And what does that do to investor confidence or consumer confidence? That basically depletes it as well. And people would be less willing to purchase the specific currency. So we do, as much as we look at employment, which is one of the biggest factors in driving the gross domestic product of an economy, earnings or wages also is a very big factor with regards to predicting inflation and gross domestic product. So it's, as much as you are willing to keep an eye on the unemployment rate, keep an eye on how much people are being paid within a specific economy, because this also does factor in to inflation as much as it does into GDP. Right guys, that brings us to the end of our Liquid Wealth trading session. Shout out to everybody that watched the video. Please click like over there and subscribe to our YouTube page. That's basically a wrap for today. I'm gonna go look at some markets, play some pool, and just relax for the rest of the day. Shut up.